Okay, just a practical note. It looks like I messed up and the PDF for tonight included both part 19 and part 20. We're going to start at the beginning of part 20, which is on what calls itself page 118, and I apologize. I guess it's the 8th page of the PDF. In any case, tonight is part 20 of our continuing series on the 4th chapter of Bava Metzia. And we are going to spend almost all of this evening on page 54a. We will get to the very top of 54b at the end. And we start with a little bit continuing something that we had been working on last time. It's been a few weeks, but we had been talking about the question of how to calculate a fifth when the Torah tells us to add an extra fifth to a number of different things. There's the case where you stole something, took an oath lying about having stolen it, and then you admit that in fact you did steal it. You have to pay it back with an extra fifth. Then there's the case that we saw a bunch of times of desacralizing Maaser Sheni, where your Maaser Sheni needs to be eaten in Yerushalayim, but if you can't take it to Yerushalayim because you're not going to be there soon enough, or because the trip is too far, or it's too fragile, whatever it is, then you can sell the Maaser Sheni, take the money to Yerushalayim, and buy food there to eat. And if you sell the Maaser Sheni to yourself, then you have to pay an extra fifth. And the third case, which I'm not sure we had discussed before, but which we will definitely be discussing tonight, is a case of somebody who was not supposed to have eaten truma, so not a Kohen or a member of a Kohen household, who eats truma and by mistake. And when they discover that they've eaten it, they, in addition to bringing a sacrifice, they also need to pay a Kohen the value of the truma plus a fifth. Okay, and so in all of those cases, the Gemara had asked in our last section whether that fifth is calculated what they called from the inside or from the outside. Right, and from the inside meant a fifth of the stuff that you're evaluating. So a fifth of the value of the Maaser Sheni, or a fifth of the value of the Truma, a fifth of the value of the stuff that you stole, so that then you'll add it. And so if you stole or ate or whatever 100, then a fifth of that would be 20, and the total would be 120. That would be from the inside. If you're calculating a fifth from the outside, which is the way that we decided is the correct way to do it, that would mean that you're taking a quarter of whatever amount you're evaluating. So if the amount that you ate or stole or are desacralizing is 100, then you would take 25, and then now you have 125, and the extra 25 that you added is a fifth of the final total. So we call that calculating a fifth from the outside. And we decided in the last Gemara that we saw that that's the correct way to calculate it. Okay, so the Gemara that we're starting with this evening confirms that the question of whether to calculate from the inside or from the outside is reflected in a dispute. So it says kitanai, like a dispute among Tanaim. The pasuk in Vayikra said v'asaf chamishito alav. I don't know where the vowels are missing from the word chamishito. I apologize. Sheyehehu v'chumsho chamisha divrei Rabbi Yoshaya. So, and the pasuk says, and he will add its fifth to it. And that weird language of its fifth, Rabbi Yoshaya takes to mean that it and its fifth together will be 5 of something. So the original stuff is 4 parts. The thing you're adding is one more part, and together they're 5 parts. That's what we called calculating from the outside, which is, as I said, the way that we said we're doing it. Rabbi Yonatan says, Chamishito chumsho shel Karen. He says, its fifth means a fifth of the principal, which is calculating from the inside, which is the way that we normally calculate fractions in our math now, which that position exists here. It's ascribed to Rabbi Yonatan. It is not the position that we follow universally. A fifth across all of Jewish tradition is calculated, as I said, from the outside, which is to say that it's what we today would call a quarter. Okay, now we have another question about how to deal with the chomesh. Chomesh ma'akev oino ma'akev. So they asked, is the fifth, does it prevent whatever it is you're paying for, does it prevent it from working if you don't pay the fifth? Right. So if you ate the truma by mistake and you paid back the principal, but you didn't pay back the extra fifth, would you get atonement? Or if you stole and you lied under oath about stealing, and then you admit that you lied, and now you pay back the principal, but you don't pay back the fifth, would you be absolved of the stealing? Presumably you still owe the other money, but does it stop you from achieving whatever goal it is you're supposed to be achieving by paying? And in the case of the Maaser Sheni, suppose that you only pay the principal payment, you don't pay the extra chomesh. In that case, is your Maaser Sheni desacralized, right? Have you successfully moved the holiness from the Maaser Sheni onto the money? So they're going to try to explain what they mean by the question, which I guess I just did, but now let's read it inside. Arba ba'arba parik, is it that 4 is desacralized with 4, meaning your 4 parts that you have already paid, which are the principal? Does that, since you've paid for the amount that whatever it is you're paying for is worth, does that successfully do it? Mosif chomesh, and then he adds another fifth for his own mitzvah, meaning like you still owe the fifth, you're supposed to pay it, but you're paying it for yourself, not because it's connected to the stuff you're paying for. And in that case, the chomesh, the extra fifth, doesn't get in the way of the payment working. Oh, Dilma arba v'chamisha parik v'chomesh ma'akev. Or maybe you need to pay 5/4 of the value in order to make the payment work at all. And right, so you need to desacralize 4 with 5. And if you didn't pay the whole thing, it didn't work. You didn't do it. In which case, that would mean that it is ma'akev. It does prevent it from working if you don't pay it. Amar Ravina. So Ravina says, I think I have a source that can get us to an answer to this question. Tashma, come in here. Hademai ein lo chomesh ve'ein lo biur. Demai does not have a chomesh and it does not have destruction. So let's talk about demai is first, and then we can talk about what destruction is. Demai is produce or grain, whatever, something that's grown in the land of Israel, that you got it from an Am Haaretz, right? Am Haaretz in modern Hebrew means someone who's uneducated, somebody who's possibly not very civilized. But the meaning in the Mishnah seems to be more of a sectarian meaning. And the Amei Haaretz are people who are more or less part of our sect of Judaism, but they don't entirely follow the directions of the rabbis on certain specific mitzvot. And so there are certain specific things that we don't trust them to do right. They're not quite uncooperative enough for us to call them a different sect, but they're not quite cooperative enough for us to really trust them as part of our group either. In any case, one of the things we don't trust them to do is to take all of the taxes properly from their produce after they harvest it and before they sell it. So we do trust them to take the first truma, but then we think they sell it at that point without taking anything else, at least sometimes. It seems like there's a significant portion of Amei Haaretz that do in fact take the gifts properly, but there are enough that don't, that we don't have a lot of trust. So demai is the stuff that you bought from them, which from the Torah, you're allowed to trust another from Jew that his food is kosher. He tells you it's kosher, you're allowed to eat it. But we're suspicious because he's from this group of people that sometimes doesn't do this specific thing. And so the rabbis said that although it is permitted from the Torah, and sometimes the rabbis will allow you to eat it the way it is, most of the time the instructions are to take the rest of the taxes. You take the Maaser Rishon and the Truma from the Maaser and the Maaser Sheni without a bracha, and you don't actually have to give them to anybody, well, except the Truma, because you're not allowed to eat Truma if you're not a Kohen, because you're not sure it belongs to somebody else, but there's a mitzvah to separate it. So we do separate it, and then we desacralize the Maaser Sheni and give the Truma from the Maaser to a Kohen. Now, the Ravina is quoting this Braita that says that when you take Maaser Sheni from this demai, which probably didn't need Maaser Sheni taken from it at all, and you're doing it just in case, when you desacralize that stuff that's probably not Maaser Sheni, but might be Maaser Sheni, you don't have to pay an extra fifth. Okay, and it doesn't need destruction. So let's see what that means. That's Devarim 14:28. Is the citation that I put in here. Here's hoping that's right. Yeah. Devarim 14:28 says, Miktsei shalosh shanim, at the end of every 3 years, totzi et kol ma'asar tvuatcha bashana hahi, v'hinachta b'sha'arecha. Take out all of your ma'aser, of your grain, from that year, and leave it in your gates, right? This is the ma'aser ani, the maaser that goes to poor people that we take instead of maaser sheni on the 3rd year. Uva Levi, and then the Levi will come because he doesn't have a piece of land to farm with you. V'hager, and the convert who also presumably doesn't have land because land was inherited. V'hayatom, and the orphans may have land, but they may not have any people to farm it. V'ha'almana, and the widow who, since most of the land is being inherited through the male line, she may not have land to get food either. Asher b'sha'arecha, who are in your gates. V'achlu v'saveyu, and they will eat and they will be satisfied. L'man yivarechecha Hashem Elokecha b'chol ma'aseh yadcha asher taseh, so that God will bless all the things that you're do. Okay, so in the 3rd year, this stuff wouldn't be maaser sheni, it would be maaser ani, and there would be this responsibility to take it and pile it outside in your gates so that the poor people can come and eat it. That apparently is you do not have to do if it was from demai, because like I said before, since it probably didn't need to be separated to begin with, we're not going to make you pay it to somebody else if probably it's yours. Generally speaking, the laws of property operate the other way, that if we're only going to make you give somebody else something if we're sure that it doesn't belong to you. We don't usually, right? The rule in halacha, the way we put it in halacha is hamotzi mechavero alav haraya. If you're going to force someone else to give you something, you have the burden of proof. Or in American language, we tend to call that possession is 9/10 of the law. Either way, both legal systems assume that if it's yours and there's no evidence it belongs to somebody else, you're allowed to keep it. So the rule of demai would be, since probably this stuff didn't need to be separated at all, probably it belongs to you, so you can keep it. Okay, but the fact that Ravina is interested in is that you don't have to pay the 5th from the demai, but hakeren yeshlo, but you do have to pay the principal. Meaning you separated your maaser sheni if it's year 1 or 2, not year 3. You separated your maaser sheni from your demai. You do have to pay for it to make it not holy anymore. And apparently that works. You exchange the money for the food, and that works without having to pay the extra 5th. And the Gemara says, my time, why do you have to pay for it at all? Right? Like I said, it's probably not maaser sheni. Why don't we just say you can just keep it? So they say, Karen de me'akev b'deoraita. So the principle which does prevent, meaning if you didn't pay it, your Maser Sheni would stay Maser Sheni. So since the principle does prevent from the Torah, ita b'drabanan, it exists in the rabbinic law. The rabbi said you have to pay the principal here, even though this is only rabbinic and it's probably not Maser Sheni, because if this were real Maser Sheni, you would have to pay the principal or it wouldn't work at all to desacralize it. But Chomesh Delo Me'akev B'Deoraita, but the fifth, which does not prevent the desacralization if you didn't pay it, on a Torah level, the rabbis didn't make you do it at all. Now today, by the way, we desacralize Maser Sheni on far less than the real value of the produce, because the money, there's no way to properly use it, buying food in Yerushalayim and eating it, because it has to be eaten in a state of tahara, which in the absence of the red heifer, we don't have access to. And so since the money is only going to be destroyed anyway, we actually now, we don't even pay the principal. We pay a token pruta for the Maser Sheni and then destroy the coin. Okay. So Ravina says that the fifth definitely is not a problem if you didn't pay it. I mean, you have to pay it because you owe it, but it's not a problem in the sense that it didn't prevent the payment from working if you didn't pay it. So we say Lema Katanai. Let's say that this is like a dispute between Tanai. Maybe the Breita that Ravina quoted isn't the only available opinion. Maybe there's actually a dispute. Natanata Karen velo Natanata Chomesh. So this Breita seems to directly address our case. If somebody paid the principal but didn't pay the extra fifth, Rabbi Eliezer Omer Yochal. Rabbi Eliezer says he should eat his Maser Sheni, meaning it's now kosher. He's successfully redeemed it, desacralized it, even though he didn't pay the extra fifth. Rabbi Yehoshua Omer Lo Yochal. Rabbi Yehoshua says he's not allowed to eat it, which sounds on the surface like Rabbi Yehoshua thinks that his not paying the extra fifth stopped the desacralizing from working. The food is still holy. He's not allowed to eat it. Amar Rabbi Yehuda Nasi said, Nir'in divrei Rabbi Eliezer b'Shabbat v'divrei Rabbi Yehoshua b'chol. Rabbi says, and we're going to hear Rabbi Yehuda Nasi say something similar twice tonight about different cases. This seems to be something that he did sometimes. As he was preparing the Mishnah, he would say, sometimes I agree with this person, sometimes I agree with that person, and he'd put that description of his position in the text. In this case, it's not in a Mishnah, it's in a Breita, but still. So Rabbi said, I like what Rabbi Eliezer said on Shabbat, and I like what Rabbi Yehoshua said on weekdays, which seems to mean that when it's Shabbat and you can't fix the problem because you can't pay the rest of the money, so then let's rule like Rabbi Eliezer and say you're allowed to eat it now and pay the money later. But when it's not Shabbat, go get the money and pay it before you eat, like Rabbi Yehoshua says you have to. And that doesn't sound like it doesn't work if you don't pay it. It sounds like he just thinks that it's wrong not to pay it before you eat, which is a different kind of problem. Okay, but Amar Nir'in divrei Rabbi Eliezer b'Shabbat. From the fact that Rabbi said, I like what Rabbi Eliezer said better on Shabbat. Michlal depligi afilu b'chol. That makes it sound like the dispute is both on Shabbat and on weekdays. And Mida Amar Nir'in divrei Rabbi Yehoshua b'chol. And from the fact that he said, I like Rabbi Yehoshua better on weekdays, Michlal depligi afilu b'Shabbat. From that, you can deduce that they disagree even on Shabbat. Right? It sounds like Rabbi Yehoshua and Rabbi Eliezer have this dispute all the time. And Rabbi Yehuda Nasi is picking and choosing and saying, we should rule like this one on Shabbat and that one on weekdays, even though Rabbi Eliezer and Rabbi Yehoshua themselves hold their positions all the time. So, my love b'hasparak miflagei, isn't this the idea that they're disagreeing about? The Rabbi Eliezer savar chomesh lo me'akev, because Rabbi Eliezer thinks that the fifth doesn't prevent the desacralizing from happening, right? That's why he lets you eat, even though you didn't pay the fifth yet. Rabbi Yoshua Savar Chomesh Ma'akev, and maybe Rabbi Yoshua thinks, in fact, the desacralizing doesn't work unless you paid the Chomesh, and that's why he won't let you eat until you pay the whole thing. Amar Rav Papa says that's not what's going on here. He says, Lo, Techule Alma Chomesh L'Ma'akev. He says, no, I think everybody here, Rabbi Yoshua and Rabbi Eliezer and Rabbi Yudah Nasi, all three of them, agree that Chomesh Lo Ma'akev, that the payment of the extra fifth does not, if you didn't do it, does not prevent the desacralizing from working. They're arguing about something else. But they're arguing about whether we're worried about negligence. Now, one of them thinks that we're worried about negligence, and the other one thinks we're not worried about negligence. All right, so what that would mean is that Rabbi Eliezer, he says you can eat it. He thinks you'll pay it later. He trusts you. You're good for it. You can eat it today, and you'll still remember to pay the money tomorrow. And Rabbi Yoshua says, well, no, actually, why would you even remember to pay it tomorrow? Once we let you eat the food, you're not going to spend any more time and energy thinking about redeeming the food. And if we want the money, we'd better get you to pay it up front before we let you eat the food. Right? But it's not about the food not being kosher. It's just about basically holding the food hostage until you do what you're supposed to do. Sort of in the same way that the rabbi said that you're not supposed to eat before you pray in the morning. And you're not supposed to eat when Shabbat ends until you make Havdalah. Right? Those aren't about there being something wrong with eating. It's just that if we don't let you eat until you do something, you'll remember to do it because you're uncomfortable and you want to fix the situation and you're hungry. So you're going to do the thing that we want you to do so that you can eat. Okay. So Amar Rabbi Yochanan. Rabbi Yochanan wants to introduce another distinction into our situation. Because there's another situation of a fifth that I forgot to mention. I mentioned 3 situations where you pay a fifth. At the beginning of class, I forgot this one, so I guess there are 4 at least, unless there's something else I forgot. And the 4th is if you dedicate your property to the temple, then you can bid in the auction alongside everybody else to get it back. And in fact, if there are 2 bids that are the same and one of them is yours, we let you have it. Or you get a little bit of a leg up in getting your stuff back because it's yours, and we do think you should get it back, but also because we get more money if you're the one who buys it. Because if the owner buys back their own stuff from the temple auction, they have to pay an extra fifth. Probably because the assumption is that that's why they donated it to begin with, was as an excuse to donate extra money, and that, right, they're not, this isn't just about buying stuff for them. This is about making the donation that they plan to make to begin with. Okay, so Rabbi Yochanan says that everybody agrees. Everybody agrees that when you're buying back your own sanctified property from the temple treasury at the auction, that it works to make the stuff yours again and make it not be holy anymore if you paid the principal, even if you didn't pay the extra fifth yet. Because in that case, there's a temple treasurer who's going to hunt you down and demand payment, even in public, which might be embarrassing. But there's someone who's going to go after you for the money, and they're going to go get it, and you're going to have to pay. In real life, we're not worried that you'll forget to pay because it's not up to you. Okay. So Rabbi Yochanan is suggesting if we're worried that there's a dispute about whether we're worried about you forgetting to pay when it's the extra fifth on your Maser Sheni, which you're basically paying to yourself in the privacy of your own home, and you might not bother or you might forget. But when you're paying an external party who is going to hunt you down and demand the money, that he thinks there's not a dispute. Everybody agrees you're not going to, that we don't need to incentivize you to pay because you're going to pay. Okay, except that apparently that's not true because uvehekdesh lo pligi. Wait, they really don't disagree about sanctified property, but we have a breita in which they do. That Tanya, but it says in a breita, natana de karen v'lo natana chomesh. If somebody paid the principal and didn't pay the fifth, and this apparently isn't a case of sanctified property, you're buying back from the temple treasurer at the auction. Rabbi Eliezer or Mer Hillel, Rabbi Eliezer, the same person who before said that it works to desacralize your Maser Sheni without the fifth. He again says here that your property that you're trying to buy from the temple treasurer becomes desacralized, right? It goes back to being normal stuff. Sorry, I was trying to move my screen. I didn't do it right. But the other rabbis say that it didn't work. Your stuff is still holy. And I'm a Rebbe, and again, Rabbi Yehuda Nasi comes in, and he likes one side sometimes and the other side other times. He says, "Nir'in divrei Rabbi Eliezer behekdesh." Says, I like Rabbi Eliezer's words better with hekdesh, with sanctified property. V'divrei chachamim b'maser, but I like the rabbis' words that they don't, that you that it didn't work. I like that about Maser Sheni. So that sounds like two things. One is like we maybe didn't understand Rabbi Yehuda Nasi's position in the other breita because it's not so the way we understood it before is not compatible with this statement by the same person. And the other thing is, it doesn't seem like we can say that there's no dispute about sanctified property because we just have a dispute right here about sanctified property. So we are going to analyze it the same way we analyzed the last one. Mida amar nir'in divrei Rabbi Eliezer behekdesh. So from the fact that Rabbi Yehuda Nasi says, I like Rabbi Eliezer better about the sanctified property, that implies that they argue on both cases, both the sanctified property and the maser, and vice versa. From the fact that he says, I like better the opinion of the sages about the maser sheni, from that, I can conclude that they disagreed about both cases. They also disagreed about the sanctified property. So it seems like there really is a dispute here about whether it works if you go to the sanctified property auction and you win the bidding and you pay the temple treasurer the principal and you didn't pay him the extra fifth yet. Do you get your property or not? And there seems to be a dispute practically about whether you get your stuff or not. Ella itmar hachitmar. So we're going to have to rewrite our conclusion a little bit more delicately. Amar Rabbi Yochanan. So Rabbi Yochanan must in fact have said, not what we thought he said a minute ago, but instead this. Hakol modim b'Shabbat behekdesh shechilel. Everybody agrees that if it's Shabbat and you were redeeming your sanctified property, that it worked. It did desacralize, even if you didn't pay the fifth. Now, presumably this is because you bought it back from the temple treasurer on Friday afternoon, right before Shabbat. You're not actually buying it on Shabbat. But now you already did this. Now it's Shabbat. And the question is, can I, sit in my favorite chair that I just got back from the temple treasurer on Shabbat, or is it still belong to the temple and I'm not allowed to sit in it? I can't fix it now because I can't pay the fifth today. So now we're just going to have to answer like yes or no. You can sit in the chair, you can't sit in the chair, but there's no point in trying to incentivize you to pay because you can't do that today anyway. So everybody agrees that in that case, with the sanctified property and it's Shabbat and you want to use your sanctified property for the purposes of enjoying Shabbat, everybody agrees that we do let you sit in the chair. First of all, because it says in Yeshayahu, I think this is the Haftorah for fast day afternoons, I think. Either that or Yom Kippur morning. I get them confused. It says, V'karata l'Shabbat oneg, you will call Shabbat a delight. Well, you're supposed to enjoy Shabbat. And if we tell you you're not allowed to sit in your favorite chair on Shabbat, then that's not really in keeping with the other values of the system. So if technically you're allowed to sit in the chair, then we should allow you to sit in the chair and not say, well, you might not pay your debts tomorrow. You better not sit in the chair today, because then you won't enjoy Shabbat so much. And it's not worth it to make that decree to interfere with your Shabbat. And also, it happens that we're not so worried anyway, because because the temple treasurers are going to demand payment in the marketplace. So we're not actually worried that you're not going to pay it, because you're going to pay it. They're going to take it away from you. But it sounds like all of the other cases are going to be disputed. Anything related to Maser Sheni, anything that's not on Shabbat, is in fact going to be disputed. So we still don't know our answer about how the law goes. Amar Rami Bar Chama says, Hare Amru Hekdesh Eino Mitchalel al Karka. So Rami Bar Chama says, I have another problem. He says, there are a bunch of rules about how you pay for the things that also have a fifth. With each of those rules, does the rule about how you pay also apply to the fifth or not? So here's his first example, is that when you're paying the temple treasurer to retrieve your belongings that you sanctified, you're not allowed to pay with real estate. You have to pay with movable property or with money. Derachmana Amar, because God said in the Torah, V'natan hakesef v'kamlo, he will give the silver, and then it will be for him. It will stand for him. It will become his. So it says you have to give silver. That doesn't sound like real estate. That sounds like money. So you have to pay with money. But Rami Bar Chama wants to know, Chumsho mahu she'yitchalel al hakarka. Suppose, right, that you donated let's just keep it your favorite chair. You donated your favorite chair to the temple treasury. Now you're buying it back at auction, and the auction went up to $1,000, and you have $1,000 in cash, but you don't have another $250 with you, and you want to give, a corner of your office or whatever to the temple treasury as the fifth. Maybe you'll have to come back and ransom that at a premium also. But in the meantime, you'd like to pay the rest of your bill to the temple treasury in real estate. Does that work? Are you allowed to do that? Because you couldn't have paid the principal $1,000 in real estate. That you had to pay with money. Okay. And then we have another similar example. Truma eina mishtalemet ela min hachul. Truma, if you ate truma when you were not supposed to because you're not a Kohen, and you need to pay back for it, right? So it uses the word desacralize or yitchalel here, but the truth is that you can't actually desacralize truma. We are sort of retrospectively paying for truma that's already been destroyed or eaten. But we're using the word desacralize anyway, because that's what fits in with all of our other cases. It's a little bit problematic, but that seems just to be the way it is here. In any case, the principle of the price of the truma needs to be paid from unsanctified food. And what that means is that you pay for it at the price it would have been worth if it were normal food and anyone could eat it. Okay, so suppose I have 100 pounds of 100 pounds of grapes that are truma, and I have 100 pounds of grapes that are not truma. So the 100 pounds of grapes that are not truma might cost $4 a pound, because they're normal food, anyone could eat them. So they're cost $400. But the truma grapes, nobody can eat them except a Kohen. The market for them is much more restricted. Even the Kohen can only eat them sometimes. So you're going to pay a much lower price for that. So those 100 pounds of truma grapes are going to cost maybe $200. Okay. So suppose that you had destroyed or eaten, that's a lot of grapes, but let's pretend anyway, just to keep the numbers even, 100 pounds of truma grapes. What this is saying is that you have to pay for it $400 as if it was full price produce. You can't say, well, it wasn't very valuable anyway. I'm just paying you the truma price. Okay, because because the Torah says you're supposed to give the Kohen the holy thing, the holy food. Davar hara'ui liyot kodesh. You have to give him something which could become holy. You can't give him something which is already devalued because it's already holy. But chum shamahu sheishtalem shalom minachulin. So, does the extra fifth have to be paid at the basically inflated rate of regular food, or can it be paid at the deflated rate of truma? Right. And now when you're paying your $400 for your 100 pounds of grapes and you owe an extra fifth, is that $100 because it's a quarter of the $400 that it would have been worth if it weren't truma? Or is it only $50 because that's a quarter of what it would cost if it was actually truma? Okay. And we have another parallel case. Maser Sheni ein mitchalel al ha'asimon. So Maser Sheni, as we noted a bunch of weeks ago, we did discuss this. Maser Sheni needs to be redeemed on actual coins. You can't give precious metals that aren't manufactured into coins to desacralize your Maser Sheni. So Maser Sheni cannot be desacralized on an asimon. An asimon is a coin which is that's the right weight to be a coin, it's the right shape to be a coin, but it hasn't been stamped. It's just a blank. The English word I believe is a planchet. It's a blank circle of silver, and so that doesn't work for Maser Sheni. De Rachmana Amar, because God said, "V'tzarta hakesef biadcha." You will tie up the silver in your hand, and the word for tie up is sarta, from tzadi reish reish. That shoresh means to tie in a bundle. So, but the Midrash says l'rabot kol davar sheyesh lav tzura. So that's meant to include that you can pay for it with anything that has a shape on it, a picture on it. Right? The tzura presumably is from the root tzadi vav reish, not tzadi reish reish. It's a different root, but it's similar enough. We're making a pun here and deciding that you have to have a minted coin to redeem it. We're going to ask the same question we asked for everything else. Simon. Well, okay, you paid the principal using minted money, but can you pay the extra fifth with unminted silver? So itgalgel milta umata l'kamei derova. The matter rolled along, right? It sounds like the issue was debated, people argued about it, and eventually it came to Rava. Amar Lahu. So Rava said, Amar kra alav l'rabot chumsho kimoto. He said, the Torah says you add its fifth to it or on it to make the fifth be just like it. Meaning, in all of these cases that you've mentioned, when there are restrictions on how you pay the principal, those restrictions always apply to the fifth also, in their various and respective ways. Amar Ravina, and Ravina said, Af ana nami tanina. He said, well, now that Rava found the answer, I'll tell you that we also have a Braita that supports this answer. Hagonev truma velo achla. So somebody stole truma and didn't eat it. So this person is guilty of theft, but they're not guilty of any other crimes yet. Mishalem tashlume kefil dmei truma. This person pays double payment, and they pay it at the value of truma. Presumably, one of the things they give back is going to be the original food, but now, in order to pay a double payment, you also have to pay for it with money. So in our example, where we had the grapes, which were worth $400 if they were regular, normal food, but they were only worth $200 if they were truma. So this person is going to give back the truma that's worth whatever it's worth. It's itself. And then they're going to pay another $200 because the double payment that they pay is calculated at the price the stuff is actually worth on the marketplace. Okay, but that's somebody whose only crime was stealing it. On the other hand, achla, if the thief ate the truma while they had it, and the thief is not a Kohen, if the thief were a Kohen, things would be different. But if the thief is not a Kohen and they ate the truma, then mishalem shnei kronim v'chomesh. This person is going to have to pay the principal twice because they're a thief, so they have to pay double. V'chomesh, and they have to pay an extra fifth because they ate truma they weren't supposed to eat, so that obligated them to an extra fifth. Karen v'chomesh min hachulin. They're going to pay one principal and the fifth at the price of chulin, of regular unsanctified food, right? They can't actually give back the food in this scenario because it doesn't exist anymore. They ate it, but they're going to pay for it at the higher inflated regular food price. That's 400 plus the fifth, calculated also at the regular food price. So that gets us to 500. And Karen made truma, and then they're going to pay another principal payment, which is this is the double payment because they stole it, at the deflated truma price, which is another 200. They're going to end up paying a total of 700. But notice that it's both the principal and the fifth that it said have to be paid at the higher regular food price, not at the truma price. Shmamina chumsho kmoto shmamina. So from this we learn that the fifth is paid using all the same rules as the principal, whatever that might be. Okay, and we never did fully resolve the issue of the whether not paying the fifth prevents the payment from working. Although it seemed like in the end we were all agreeing that it would work if it were Shabbat and we didn't have a concern about negligence. So that sounds like if it doesn't work because the rabbi said so, not because it has some sort of inherent Torah problem. But there were disputes about whether to impose a restriction in which you weren't allowed to use the thing until you finished paying for it if it wasn't Shabbat, or if there wasn't a temple treasurer who was going to chase you down. On the other hand, in this latter thing about how to pay the fifth, the answer is yes, the fifth has all the same restrictions about how you pay it as the principal. If it's sanctified property, you have to pay in money instead of real estate. If it's truma, you have to pay at the unsanctified food price. If it's maaser sheni, you have to pay with minted coins. All the same restrictions. Okay, that is what I have for you this evening. Are there questions? Yeah, John.
So say I stole something and I didn't eat it, but I gave it to another person to eat. Are the rules any different?
So I think that truma, yes, actually, I think it would be different. Let's assume that what you stole was truma, and the person who you gave it to eat was not a Kohen, but is an adult. Let's assume that they're a legally responsible grown up, because otherwise things get too complicated. So I think actually in that case you pay double at the truma price. So you would pay the lower price twice, and the other person, the person who actually ate it, is going to pay the higher price plus a fifth. So in fact, the Kohen is going to get quite a large pile of money back. They're going to get back more than 4 times what the stuff is actually worth by the time they're done. Because you have to pay for it twice because you stole it, and the other guy has to pay for it because he ate it, and he has to pay an extra fifth, and he has to pay the principal and the fifth at the higher price. Yes.
So what happens if the other person did not know that it was stolen?
I don't think it matters whether they know that it's stolen. It might matter whether they know that it's truma.
Okay.
But the crime they committed wasn't stealing. The crime they committed was eating truma when they're not a Kohen.
Even if they didn't know that it was truma?
If they should have known, certainly. Even if they didn't. If they couldn't have known, then maybe not. But this is not my area of expertise. I can try to
Yeah.
do a little bit of research for next week.
I mean, I'm imagining the thief has told the person he's given the truma to, I grew this in my garden
All right. So
and picked it last
if
night.
it's, I think it's going to depend on how suspicious we think that person should have been, which might depend on the circumstances. But I can try to do a little research by next week. Okay, I will see you guys next Monday. I think we're probably meeting. I think next Monday and the Monday after is still before Pesach. Then we're gonna miss 2 Mondays because they're Yom Tov, and then hopefully we'll come back again after that. It's a very long chapter, but I would like to still try to finish it before the end of the year. All right, thank you very much. Have a good night.